First things first, Operation Silver Fox, despite some accusations to the contrary, is not a reference to my greying hair. It was a genuine operation launched by the Germans June of 1941 in an effort to try and take the port of Murmansk off the board, and by doing so prevent Allied supply convoys coming into Russia. Unfortunately, Operation Barbarossa, which was the wider invasion of Russia, was quite resource heavy. So in this case, Hitler had to call on his ally of Finland to help him out in terms of manpower to try and take the operation. The operation was not a resounding success. It opened in June, ran till November, and German and Finnish forces got to within 20 miles of Murmansk. And in November of 1941, Finland essentially withdrew its armies from the attack. The Finnish government was under pressure from the Americans in relation to American deliveries going in to the war effort, and were basically told, if you don't back off and stop interfering, you're likely to come on our radar as well. As a result, the German troops who were involved in the attack were largely SS divisions, policing divisions, and not used to conventional military fighting, particularly not in snow. And they had no further impetus once the Finnish troops had withdrawn. So in this case, if anybody causes the tragic events of BES to take place, it's Finland. Sorry, Finland, you're the bad guy in this. Have you noticed how every franchise has to be a verse these days? Like the Marvel verse or the DC verse or the Fast and Furious verse. So I kind of feel like this channel has to go the same way. Maybe we'll have the Unclassified verse or the Encounter verse. So as I've said before, when I write these stories, they tend to be based around genuinely military campaigns or events that took place, and we just insert the supernatural paranormal to them. Now, sometimes, ever so often, I just have to take the truth and just tweak it or mess with it or blend it, just crowbar it, just so it fits into the newly christened Encounterverse. And this is one of those cases, and I'm prepared to be called out on it. German military chaplains of World War II discuss. Yes, they were a thing, but were they in the SS? No, they weren't. Obviously, it might strike you that the idea of being a chaplain and being in Nazi Germany don't really go hand in hand with each other. That had certainly struck the Catholic Church, which told Adolf Hitler to shove it when he asked to have a military bishop. They said no. So being Hitler, he just created his own. There was a German military bishop post established in 1935, and that ensured that military chaplains could work in the German army during the war. They were introduced into the army in 1935, and there were roughly 1,000 in total. There were approximately 560 Catholic chaplains, and then another 400 odd Protestant chaplains. And they were divided up so that each division, so if you're talking 15,000 men, had two chaplains. They had a Catholic one and had a Protestant one. And the chaplains would hear confession, they'd give communion, and they'd support the soldiers in what they were doing. And that was spread across the Wehrmacht and across the Kriegsmarine. Wasn't in the Luftwaffe, because Göring decided it wasn't for him. And it wasn't in the SS, because Himmler was fanatically anti-religion. But you did find that the army Protestants would minister to people in the Luftwaffe. I'm not sure if they did in the SS or not. Bit of opposition there. So you couldn't have had an SS military chaplain. That is a purely created function for the Encounterverse. But I guess what you could have in the chaos of military units falling back from a failed attack, maybe you ended up with a military chaplain mixed in with an SS unit. Who's to say? You know, these things can happen, can't they? There's a passing reference in the story to the chaplain looking at his belt buckle and seeing the phrase, "God is with us, Gott mit uns." The German army, going back centuries, on their belt buckles of their soldiers, certainly pre-World War I, had put the phrase, "Gott mit uns," God is with us. And that continued during World War II. Hitler certainly liked the appearance that religion backed what he was doing. Again, on the SS buckles, it said something slightly differently. It said, "My honour is my loyalty." So our chaplain, if he was a Wehrmacht chaplain, would indeed have had "God is with us" on his belt. But if he was in the SS, it would have said, "My honour is my loyalty." So there we go. Is it a confession of a mistake? Maybe. Is it hidden under "I can do what I want"? Probably. Now, in terms of the use of Cossacks, I don't have to bend the truth here, but it is quite a complicated feature in World War II history. My first exposure to the idea of Cossacks in World War II comes from an unlikely source, which potentially ages me when I admit it, but that's the movie GoldenEye. Is it the best Bond movie of all time? No. Is it without its flaws? No. Was it one of the biggest ones when I was growing up? Yes. And it had a very good computer game adaptation on the N64. Google the Rumble Pack. That's how your dads and granddads used to play computers. If I'm honest, my main issue with that movie was they just wouldn't let Sean Bean speak in his own accent, and he sounds ridiculous trying to do a posh accent. Closing time at the pub, James. It's bloody awful. But he makes reference, his character in the movie, to the fact that his parents were Lienz Cossacks and they were betrayed by the British. And there is truth in that. Largely, if you go back through the history of Cossacks, they had a long-standing reputation for serving the Russian army. But during the Civil War, they sided with the white movement, and consequently they were on the losing side. So the Red Army banned Cossacks largely in 1919, and they were heavily repressed. But by 1936, they'd started reintroducing them back into the Red Army, and certainly by the time of the German invasion, there were 2 Cossack divisions working. Some of the Cossacks were used in conventional horseback riding units. Others were used as mixed partisan units. And I guess the one that we depict getting massacred at the start of BES is a combination of the two. It's a roving partisan unit on horseback. Far more Cossacks had either already fled abroad because of Russian repression, or when the German army started going through their lands, sided with the Germans, thinking that this was their time to move again. So there were a lot of Cossacks fought on the German side during World War II. Obviously, once again, unlucky boys, you picked the wrong side. And so at the end of the war, many of them had hoped that the Allies, particularly the British and the Americans, would help them, would protect them from the Russians. And it's not a great piece of history, but essentially that didn't happen. Deals were made at the various conferences with Stalin that any combatants who'd fought against him or had been captured would be handed over. And as a consequence, the Americans, the British arranged for a lot of Cossacks and their families who'd fled the Russians to be handed back. I'm sure it's no surprise that Stalin killed, sent to labour camps or destroyed most of these. And they reckon that potentially up to 700,000 Cossacks and their families were killed in Russia after the war, which is a stain on the Allies. For some of the monsters and some of the demons in the previous stories, I've made them up from scratch. Covenant is one particular example, but not in the case of BES. BES is a genuine Slavic demon who has the ability to possess humans and also to heal itself when it's been injured. It apparently, for those of you who do play computer games, is one of the bad guys in the Witcher series in the 3rd game. It's funny that a lot of the things that I go looking for on the internet these days have already made it into computer games before I find them. There are no new ideas. Well, except for the Morgan. That's a new idea. I came up with that one. Arbez, the Slavic one, is not to be confused with the Egyptian god of the same name, who was a half-dwarf, half-lion, and a fertility god who could cure impotence. It's great, but I'm not sure he would have made a good bad guy in this case. In terms of Arbez, the one that we've come up with for this, I have to take my hats off to Sean. He had a very limited brief and expanded it brilliantly to come up with what he's done for the demon, who I think you'll agree with me is a classic bad guy. And alongside that, I had a lot of fun writing it. It's one of the one of the bloodiest episodes we've done, but a little bit like Lucius and Sorokin, I feel that we managed to get some personality into this bad guy. Some of them are just, we eat humans, or we kill people, or we're nasty. I feel like we went through the whole emotional gambit with BES, and I've also enjoyed the fact that potentially, it's not a promise, we have left the door open for him to come back in future, if needs be. Have dead body, will travel. Looking forward, as a bit of a hint for those of you who stick with these through to the end, there's 2 shorts coming up. One is a prequel short set back in World War One, up at Scapa Flow, where the Royal Navy has pissed something off locally that it shouldn't have done. The other is going to see our favourite group of Siberians, the ones who endured purgatory, in Berlin, just after it falls, going into a flak tower to confront something quite nasty that nobody knew lived inside there. I would have thought they're what's going to take us over Easter. Is that the 3rd year we've been in business now? I think it is. And then I'm going to have to try and hurriedly put pen to paper and come up with some new episodes going into the summer. As ever, any feedback or any ideas, always gratefully appreciated. So let me take this opportunity to wish you a happy Easter in advance, because we'll be knocking on the door by the time this video gets published. Hope all is well with you guys and yours, and I'll catch you on the other side.